Hello everyone. So one thing that not many people talk about is having an agreement of or about the usage of the issue types in Jira. Now, of course, when it comes to issue types in Jira, we all know that these issue types are all about the type of issues. For example, broadly, we all know what an epic is. We also know what a story. We also know what a task, but it may not be always clear to everyone in different projects. And I think publishing this information somewhere is extremely important because if you're raising a new epic, right? Let us start with an epic because epic is usually where people start their work if we are talking about software development. And when it comes to, let us say, an epic, just an example, by the way, to uh, to basically give you some context. An epic is nothing but a group of stories, or I should say, in a way, a specific feature that you want to deliver. And more than a feature, it is actually a requirement, right? And you should have an agreement, a very clear agreement on what should a requirement be if you are trying to, let us say, work on your Jira hierarchy. Have a discussion first with the various stakeholders because you may or may not be using advanced roadmaps, or you may not be on the premium plan, but eventually you might be using Jira Cloud Premium. But Epic Story and everything under it is in a way quite standard, but you may have more levels on top of it. And also at the same time, in some organizations, people use along with Epic an issue type called as a requirement, and a requirement or a functional requirement. And a requirement is nothing but a requirement that will lead to an epic, and the epic will be broken down into stories. So when you write down or when you publish the definition of these issue types in Jira, also try to elaborate or give examples on, for example, if we are talking about an epic, then epic should not have a story like combined estimate or a combined story point of more than let us say 100 story points, or it should not be more than let us say 200 hours, something like that. I mean, just to give you an idea. But when you have this definition in place, then over the period of time, you might not see the change immediately, but over the period of time, you will see the benefits because you may raise a new epic, or when people are raising a new epic, it is not really an epic, it is probably a story. Or when people raise a story, it is not really a story, it is probably an epic, right? And that can happen. And when you publish this information somewhere, or when you communicate this information, or when you talk about it, uh, and by the way, you have to do this on a regular basis because new people will come and go, and you will have new project managers, you will have new BAs. So there should be always a dialogue, an agreement, or involvement of a Jira consultant, Jira administrator, because you may have a new project manager or new BAs or new stakeholders joining your team, and they may have some previous background of doing something with Jira in their other organizations, and they will say, okay, based on my experience, an epic should be something that you will deliver in 2 weeks. And that can happen, right? Because that is probably they are used to. But in your organization, a definition of epic would be uh, something that is equivalent to a requirement. So an epic could be a technical requirement or the work that you will do to deliver the requirement. But you can also measure this maybe in your own standard. For example, maybe you can have an agreement that anything which is more than 50 story points, if you're doing something or if you're basically working on a feature or some part of this product or a project, then it is an epic. For example, let me give you one example. For example, these days we are working on improving our app, and we do have an app, by the way. It is called as Stay on Top. Stay on Top is the name of the app. So we are actually adding more features to the app, and every new feature that we release is basically an epic, and we have internal agreement that if you're releasing something, that particular release should be an epic, or in a way, a release should be uh, or one release. If it, and what we do, we try to release every sprint. So for us, or every couple of sprints. So whenever we release something, we are actually releasing at least one epic. And when we create a new epic, we are of course trying to make sure that we break it down further into actual task, so that if you complete those stories, you are actually saying that I have completed the epic. And this is also in line with the acceptance criteria, because when you raise a requirement, you can also do it within an epic. I think it is a good idea to separate it, especially when you have some or when you have some process. But even if it is not a separate issue type, whenever you are working on the epic, capture the acceptance criteria. Like, what is the acceptance criteria? The acceptance criteria could be that as a user, I am able to do these things, and if it works, then yes, it means that my epic is working, or whatever feature I wanted to deliver in these three epics or two epics, they are perfectly okay. And of course, based on the acceptance criteria, you will of course then create the test cases out of it, right? And these test cases would be nothing but you can actually have like a test case which is nothing but a story, or you can actually use Zephyr, or maybe your own issue type called test. But the point is that uh, have some agreement on the definition of what these issue types are all about, and how you're going to organize it, how you're going to break it up further. Usually, when it comes to subtasks, I normally say that subtask is a way to further break it down and let your developers do it. Don't really bother. I mean, again, it is based on what you're doing, but if you're doing some planning, or let us say if you're following Scrum and you're using Jira, then people usually have this tendency to break down their epic into story, which of course you should be doing. And within your sprint, you will have stories. You might have bugs to resolve from previous sprints or releases. You might have some tasks, but if you further break it down into subtasks, do it. But at the same time, because Jira by default and by design will not really roll up these story points or the estimates that you do on the subtask level. So don't worry too much about the subtask, or don't really include your subtask in the planning, because you might think that okay, it is a good idea to further break down your stories into subtasks, but have a think about it, have a discussion. Do we really need to do it uh, like in the planning stage? Maybe by the time you are near, let us say today you're going to start the sprint, maybe you can ask your ask your developers, okay, these are the upcoming stories, and maybe in your current sprint you can have some time allocated for maybe you know planning for the next sprint. And you don't really have to track it somewhere, but as long as you are spending some time before the next sprint to plan it. And you can of course plan it properly when you have like very clear understanding agreement with everyone, that if you're going to use subtasks, if you're going to use stories, uh, what exactly, or basically, are those stories or subtasks in line with our agreement or standard way of working. All right, that is it. That is all I wanted to talk about. And by the way, also publish this hierarchy somewhere, maybe nicely in a concise format, so that you don't really have to spend too much time reading documentation. By looking at the hierarchy, okay, epic, story, and subtask, write somewhere like in 2 lines or maybe 1 line what a story is, and of course make it a link so that people can click on it. Also have like links to the examples, so that people are able to see if they are looking for some examples, some relevant examples, so that they can relate to it. All right, that is it. That is all I wanted to talk about in this video. I hope you enjoyed watching this video and you learned something new. Thank you very much.